Hey everyone, it's Finn Pope. Welcome back to another video. I want you to ask yourself a question. Where are you storing up treasure? When you wake up each morning, what is it that gets you out of bed? What are you striving for? How often do you ask yourself these questions? Do you ever seriously ask yourself these questions? Because my fear is that a great number of us today, myself included, don't spend nearly enough time dwelling on these questions. Really honestly reflecting on our lives, thinking about where we're headed. Because the truth is that you just have one life, just one. And if you die tomorrow, there's not going to be a second chance. And each one of us has been put on this earth by God and has been given a specific mission to carry out. He's calling you specifically, watching this video right now, he's calling you to do something on this earth. You specifically. In each moment that he sustains you in existence, he does so for a reason. And this is not me trying to play on your emotions either or give you some mediocre motivational speech. No, this is just the simple truth that a lot of us today don't spend nearly enough time thinking about. So what I want to do is I want to look at what Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew about storing up treasure in heaven. And then I want to just talk about what that looks like for us, how we're called to store up treasure in heaven. I think we'd all do well to reflect on these verses more often. I know that I would. It says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Okay, so Christ instructs us not to store up treasures on earth, referring, of course, to earthly goods, where he says that moths and vermin will destroy, where thieves will break in and steal. But instead, we must store up treasures in heaven, where our treasure can't be affected by earthly powers, earthly forces. And then the last verse he says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So, what is the treasure that Christ is talking about here? Well, I think the hint is when he says, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Right? So it's that thing which you place the highest value on. Your treasure is the thing you protect. It's what you value most. And naturally, whatever you value most is also where your heart will be. Right? Whatever you value most will become the governing principle of your life. So then the question, what truly possesses our heart? Where are we storing up treasure? Because we're called to store up treasure in heaven. Or we're called to have the Lord as our treasure. To have him as that which everything else in our lives conforms to. And our love for God, our faith in Christ, should be reflected in every single aspect of our lives, no matter how small. There can be no picking and choosing. He's either Lord of our lives or he's not. And that's not to say that, we're not still going to struggle with sin. Of course, we all struggle with sin. That's a part of living in a broken world. But if we're not striving after Christ, if we're not striving daily to become more like him, to know him, to love like him, to love him, then can we really call him the Lord of our lives? I mean, I know this is something I need to pray about more. I need to reflect on more often. I think all of us do. And the reality is that this is when our lives will truly begin. It's when we stop resisting the call of the Lord. When we stop storing up treasures on earth. Because all this stuff is going to pass away in the end anyways, right? It's all temporary. So we need to give up this ridiculous game that we so often play of trying to find true peace and true meaning and things that were never meant to give us true peace and true meaning. And none of that is to say that earthly goods are bad. Of course, they're not. God has declared that everything he made is good. And additionally, we're body soul composites, right? We're not merely body, but we're also not merely soul. And so we shouldn't neglect the material. The material is good. It's good because it's from God, and the body matters. The material matters. But the trouble comes when we try to make temporal, earthly things into final and ultimate things. And, it's so difficult in our day and age. It's so hard to be faithful to the Lord and to not make finite things into ultimate things. And I especially want to point out that for those of you who are young, unmarried like myself, that aside from the temptation to place earthly goods, earthly things in the place of God, guys, we also truly face horrific evils and temptations at every turn. We live in this culture that does everything it can to prop up what is evil as good, and what is good as evil. It's really, really hard to not lose. It's hard not to become discouraged. That's something that I struggle with all the time. It can be so easy to just become numb to all of it, to just kind of check out, to become complacent in our faith, something I struggle with. But we have to resist this. We have to resist it because this is what it is to store up treasure in heaven. This is what it is to be a Christian. We must take up our cross and follow after Christ, right? That's what Christ tells us we have to do to follow him. In Matthew 16:24-26, he says, "Whoever wishes to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Whosoever wishes to save his life will lose it. Whosoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world," right? The whole world, all the earthly goods, stores up all the earthly treasure. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world but forfeits his soul? So it's not an easy path, but it's not supposed to be. I think a lot of us Christians here in the West, we most of us live very comfortable lives. And so it can become really easy to deceive ourselves into thinking that the Christian life is sort of this walk in the park. That it's just sort of this easy thing. You go to church on Sundays, pray here and there, and read our Bibles, and that's basically it. No, guys, that's not. And I'm not pointing the finger here. Again, this is something that I have to remind myself of constantly. But the Christian life is, we're in a battlefield, guys. There's a spiritual war going on that we can't see. And when we lose sight of this, when we forget this, as is so easy these days, nothing good can follow from that. So we're called to store up treasure in heaven, which means we live differently than everyone else. We suffer differently than everyone else. And that's what I want to talk about next, is the reality of suffering that is part of all of our lives. Right? We all suffer. We all have crosses to carry. But as Christians, we're called to suffer differently than everyone else. We are called to unite our sufferings to Christ. Because when we unite our sufferings to Christ, to his cross, what happens is we become like him. Because of Christ's sacrifice, our suffering can contribute to the salvation of souls, of our souls, of the souls of others. St. Paul, he writes about this frequently in his epistles, so I want to go through just a few of those passages. For example, in Colossians 1:24, he writes, "Now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh I complete what is lacking in Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, that is the church." And, this verse particularly is often the cause of confusion for people because St. Paul says that he completes what is lacking in Christ's afflictions. So what he's not saying is that Christ's death, Christ's passion, his death, and resurrection were somehow insufficient for the redemption, salvation of the world. That's not what he's saying. Rather, he's talking about how Christ's sacrifice is applied in our lives on an individual level, how his salvific work is carried out in our lives. That Christ's work on the cross, it is applied in our lives in part through our suffering, through our participation in his cross. So also in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 5 through 7, he writes, "For as we share abundantly in Christ's sufferings, so through Christ we share abundantly in comfort too. If we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation, and if we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which you experience when you patiently endure the same sufferings that we suffer. Our hope for you is unshaken, for we know that as you share in our sufferings, you will also share in our comfort." And then finally in Philippians 3:10 through 11, he writes, "That I may know him in the power of his resurrection, and may share in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, that, if possible, I may attain the resurrection from the dead." So we're called to be like Christ in all things, and that includes our suffering. That includes our crosses, most especially. To be able to say with Christ to the Father, "Not my will, but yours be done, Lord. Not what I want, but what you want." And this is actually where we find true rest, true peace, and total surrender to the will of God. It doesn't mean that we're always going to feel peaceful, right? Much of the time, we're not going to feel peaceful, probably. Because, like I said, we're in a battlefield on this earth. But it does mean that we will be at peace, because we'll be living on mission. So whatever your calling is in life, whatever the Lord is calling you specifically to do on this earth, it can only be done when you let go of your life and let go of what you want in total surrender to the will of God, giving everything back to him, saying, "All that I have, Lord, all that I have is from you. All that I have, I give back to you." This is where we find the true purpose of our lives. Right, as St. Augustine famously wrote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and therefore our heart is restless until it rests in you." So maybe we can all resolve to be more intentional about bringing these realities to prayer. It's checking in on ourselves, asking that question, how are we doing spiritually? Are we really storing up treasure in heaven? Are we giving everything to Christ, every aspect of our lives? Our relationships, our work, our free time, the media we consume, the kind of music we listen to, the things we say, the jokes we make, the things we think. Everything we're called to give back to him, to do everything for his glory. So I want to leave you all with just one more verse. It's from Psalm 86, which is just a beautiful prayer of David that is also very much worth praying with. It's absolutely wonderful. But I just want to leave you with one verse, verse 11. It says, "Teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Give me an undivided heart to revere your name."